How's it going, everybody? Hope this video finds everybody well. At the time of this video being filmed, we're about to be put on I think we're about to be put on a shelter in place. So, I'll be at home a lot here in the next week or so. Fortunately, I can work from home, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about chainsaws. We're going to have a conversation. I want to talk about anti-vibe mounts, and it's something that's kind of interested me. The design and progression of anti-vibe mounts, and essentially what spawned anti-vibration mounts. So, anti-vibration mounts kind of started being developed probably in the early 60s, and they didn't start showing up until about the mid 60s. As far as I know, there was another company that claimed that they had the first set of anti-vibe mounts. I forget who it was. I couldn't find it. I looked for it, but I couldn't recall the manufacturer. But the first that I saw was Steel. Steel developed a set of rubber anti-vibe mounts for their Contra, their large 100cc Contra models in 1965, and then in 1967 they started putting it in the 041s and stuff. So we're going to go kind of through the design, right, and we'll show you, and I'll explain a little bit about what spawned the creation of these anti-vibe mounts. So this is kind of this here was your general design back in the 50s. You have a somewhat of a vertical oriented cylinder cocked a little forward to help translate some of that vibration horizontally, but it didn't do a super great job of it. And when these one-man saws popped up in the mid, let's see, the first one was 49, so the 50s. By the time the 60s rolled around, we started seeing the health issues pop up from using saws like this. One of those is referred to as shaken hand and arm syndrome. So it's essentially from the vibration of the saw during operation. Days at a time, hours at a time. The vibration in these saws were really bad, and in the early 60s, you started seeing a move away from that, away from this vertical oriented cylinder here. You started seeing a move towards a design like this, which this was one of Homelight's first designs with the horizontal mounted cylinder. This is a C5. This popped up in 1962. But as you can see, we have the cylinder oriented horizontally, and what this was thought to do was counteract your vibration. So if your cylinder is mounted horizontally and your piston is moving laterally, as this chain is pulling, it's pulling away from you as the piston is moving towards the operator. So that was thought to have reduced some of the vibration in this design. That's why a lot of your European designs didn't go that route, but a lot of your American designs did. So McCulloch, Poland, Homelight, those three major manufacturers went with horizontal, because you had the sand casts in the 50s with the vertical oriented cylinders, much like this here, and then in the 60s you saw the reduction in size and a swap to the horizontally designed cylinders. And then a lot of your European manufacturers didn't do that, but Steel did. I'm not aware of any. Let's see. I'm not aware of any Swedish saws that did. They come in really late. Well, not both of them. Partner and Jonsered was in the game for a while, but Husqvarna come in really late. So Steel did. This is a horizontal mounted cylinder here, but it's also got anti-vibe on it. This is a later model. This is an 041 Super, but the 041 AV, when it come out in 1967, had a horizontal mounted cylinder with anti-vibe. So once the anti-vibe popped up, you started seeing saws swap back to a vertical oriented cylinder, and anti-vibe. So Homelight didn't. Homelight stayed horizontal all the way until the 90s pretty much. Then they swapped over, and so did McCullough. McCullough did the same thing. They stayed horizontal. The only one that really swapped over was Poland. Poland swapped over in the early 70s with their counter vibe, such as this one here. And that these come out in 1975. These here. And you can see they got a horizontal mounted cylinder, and they have anti-vibe mounts. This thing really vibrates bad, but that's because the anti-vibe mounts are really stiff rubber. So that's why that one shakes pretty bad. I'm still working on that one. That one's almost done. Jonsered in the late 60s, so 68, 69, come out with the 621. It was anti-vibe. This saw was launched, this is an 80, this saw was launched in 71, and it's got a full set of anti-vibe mounts here. It's got 2 mounts here, right here, in the rear handle. It's got 2 cones here on either side, so that completely separates the rear handle from the chassis here. And then your handle, your wrap handle, is isolated with two mounts here, there and there. Can you see that? It's 2 mounts. There we go. 2 mounts, one here and one here. And see, that completely isolates the chassis from the operator's hand here. And then you have one more mount right here that completely isolates the front handle from the chassis. So that cuts down a lot of vibration for the user. Another Swedish company that had a complete anti-vibe setup early on was Partner. They had an anti-vibe system that they implemented in the late 60s. It was this chassis here, but it wasn't a P70. I think it was an R17. R16 didn't have anti-vibe mounts, but the R17, 18, 19, and 20, so on and so forth, they did. They had an anti-vibe setup just like this. So much like your Jonsered here, you have a rear double cone set up here in the rear handle right there. You have another. This one has a spring mount, but I think only the wrap handle had a spring mount. I'm not 100% sure. But they used a spring mount here in the front, and then they have another big rubber mount right here on the side of this this bar here, and that isolated the whole handle system with 3 mounts from the chassis here. So this was 1975, this particular model, but it was around in the early 70s, and Johnsonred kept this design all the way up until the 90s, when, not the 90s, the 80s, when they swapped to a completely different design, but they were still using rubber mounts. Spring mounts didn't come up until the late 80s, early 90s is when the spring mounts popped up. So the spring mounts first popped up in mass in the 90s, and it was mostly Husqvarna that was using them. I'm not sure whose idea it was. You know, a lot of you Husky guys are probably going to be sour about it, but a lot of your breakthroughs in design came from Partner and Johnsonred being part of Electrolux, which owned Johnsonred, Partner, and Husqvarna. Husqvarna took a lot of credit for a lot of stuff. You can argue with me till you're blue in the face, but that's just the way it is. Your cylinder mount, your cylinder mounted anti-vibe mount that you see on just about everything, that came from Partner. Partner is the first one that done that. Your air injection that you see on all your saws, Partner and Johnsonred, they're the ones that developed that. Matter of fact, this was one of the first saws to have the air injection, and it's a Husqvarna, but Partner and Johnsonred were running that before it was official as far as marketed, before they started marketing it, because the Johnsonreds were turbo. Husqvarna was air injection, and Partner was CCS, or centrifugal cleaning system. A lot of there's a few models of Partner that had the centrifugal cleaning system in it, and it even says it on the side, centrifugal cleaning system. But Johnsonred and Partner were, really big innovators. But these early 90s saws were using these smaller springs here. I think the 288s used them. The 281s may have used them. And they also used a combination. You would see a combination. Sorry, I got a phone call. That was the order coming down the line that tomorrow we get our stuff together and work from home, shelter in place until April 12th. So I'll finish up what I was going to say, and then I'll talk a little bit about that. Where was I? Springs. Okay, so the springs come in around the early 90s. Okay, and it was or late 80s. It was a combination of springs and anti-vibe mounts. But in the 90s, it swapped over to pure spring, because springs were found to isolate vibration much more efficiently than rubber was. And you started seeing a bunch of saws being designed specifically with spring mounts, like the Johnsonred 2094, which come out in 1991, all spring mounts. First one that I know of that had all spring mounts. The 930 from the late 70s or late 80s had a combination of springs and anti-vibe mounts, and then the 90 or the 2094, which uses pretty much a 930 handle, but with the on-off switch relocated to the side of the handle right here. It had all springs. And then your 394, which come out a year after the 2094, all springs. And from there, in the Electrolux sphere, everything was springs. Um, Steel has been behind the curve on the anti-vibe. It's been rubber mounts all the way up till here recently, and the new MS saws. Y'all listen to this Mustang when it goes by. They're easing on it because they don't want to be too loud. Those that exhaust they have on that Mustang sounds amazing. But yeah, so Steel was behind the curve. They've been behind the curve when it comes to anti-vibe mounts, and only recently with their MS one, like 461, 661, 361, or yeah, 361, those started having springs. And because of the air injection patents going out, you're starting to see a lot of saws that have the air injection as well. But that is a history lesson for you. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I'm not going to harp too much on the current crisis facing society right now. It's in the news too much as it is, and hopefully I can continue to pump out videos much like this one to keep y'all entertained through these difficult times. I myself have been mentally prepared for this for a while, mainly because me and my wife had such a difficult year last year. Her employer at the beginning of last year stopped paying her. That really hurt us. They owe us several thousands of dollars, and there's nothing we can do. They just don't pay. There's nothing we can do to get it. We struggled last year, but we made it through. In October, she finally got another job and started getting paid again. But it has prepared me in that I've dealt with this before, and I mentally had to come to terms with it last year that things were going to be rough, but you're still alive. The world will go on. It may be a little more difficult, but you have your family and your support group you can fall back on and keep you in good spirits, and just be kind to everybody, and just know that things are going to get better. Sometimes things get worse before they get better, but things are going to get better. So just keep your chin up, do what you got to do, and these things will work themselves out. So yeah, it sucks to have to deal with this again after having the issues last year, but I've become a stronger person because of it, and I have my little girl and my little girl and my wife to help me, and to help me through this, and all you guys, the support that y'all have, this whole chainsaw community. So if anybody needs to talk or whatever, you have my email, bayoucountrypowersaws@gmail.com. Feel free to email me. So, alright, y'all have a good one. Stay safe, and we'll see y'all on the other side. And I'll probably be back on in a few days. So, be looking for that. Y'all have a good one.